What if I told you that while most Americans were focused on domestic politics, 10 countries just made decisions that could fundamentally reshape global trade forever? And the crazy part? It all started with threats that haven't even become reality yet. I'm talking about India's explosive rise as the world's new trade partner of choice. In just 6 months since Trump announced his tariff plans, India's international trade partnerships have jumped by 340%. That's not a typo. 340%. But here's what most people don't realize. This isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. These are real businesses, real people, and real relationships that took decades to build, now shifting faster than anyone thought possible. But before we dive in, if you're new here, hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. I subscribe. And I'll personally welcome you into the family. With that said, let's get started. Let me tell you about Sarah Chen. She's a 34-year-old electronics importer from Seattle who built her entire business around Chinese suppliers. 20 employees, steady growth, living the American dream. Then the tariff announcements hit, and everything changed overnight. Her suppliers couldn't absorb the costs. They started looking elsewhere. Within weeks, 60% of her orders vanished. But here's the twist. Sarah isn't out of business. She's actually doing better than ever. Because while her Chinese suppliers were panicking, Indian manufacturers were calling. Better prices, similar quality, and zero tariff risk. Sarah's story isn't unique. MIT's 2024 trade analysis shows that 23% of US importers are already switching suppliers. And that was just the beginning of this economic earthquake. So let's count down the 10 countries that are essentially dumping America for India, starting with the ones that might surprise you the least, and building up to the betrayal that has economists completely speechless. Countries 10, 9, and 8: Vietnam, Thailand, and Bangladesh. Now you might think, of course these Asian countries are partnering with India. But here's what's shocking. These weren't just gradual shifts. We're talking about a 290% increase in trade partnerships in less than 6 months. These countries were America's manufacturing alternatives when China got too expensive. Now they're bypassing us entirely. David Rodriguez knows this pain personally. He owns a mid-sized factory in Texas that specialized in precision parts. For 15 years, he had solid relationships with suppliers across Southeast Asia. Then the tariff threat started, and he watched helplessly as his orders got redirected to Indian competitors. David told me it felt like watching 20 years of relationship building crumble in a matter of weeks. That's when things got worse. Countries 7, 6, and 5 are going to blow your mind: Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. Yes, our oldest European allies are quietly negotiating massive trade deals with India. The European Trade Commission's internal report, which wasn't supposed to be public, shows a 45% increase in India partnerships since the tariff announcements began. If you've ever wondered why your European vacation got more expensive lately, this is part of the reason. European companies are hedging their bets, and American consumers are feeling it. Isabella Müller, CEO of a German auto parts company, made a decision that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. She moved her entire production operation from partnerships with American suppliers to a massive facility in Chennai. When I asked her about it, she said the decision was heartbreaking but necessary. Her American partners had become too risky, too unpredictable. But here's the really disturbing part. These moves happened before any tariffs were actually implemented. The mere threat was enough to reshape decades of trade relationships. That's when the real betrayal happened. Countries 4, 3, and 2 hit different, because these are our neighbors: Canada, Mexico, and Brazil. Think about that for a second. NAFTA partners, countries that share our borders, our hemisphere, our time zones, are pivoting to India instead of doubling down on North American partnerships. The shipping routes that took decades to establish are being rerouted like water flowing around a stone. The North American Trade Institute just released data showing a 67% increase in India-Latin America partnerships in the past year alone. Carlos Mendoza runs a textile manufacturing operation in Mexico that used to supply major American brands. He told me he felt abandoned by NAFTA promises as uncertainty grew. His factory now exclusively supplies Indian fashion brands, and he's never been busier. The irony is painful. American trade policies pushed our closest neighbors into the arms of our biggest competitor. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared economists for country number one. Japan, America's oldest and most trusted Pacific ally, just signed the most comprehensive trade agreement in India's history. We're talking about $500 billion in redirected trade over the next 5 years. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 34% of Japan's total international trade that was previously flowing through American partnerships. The Tokyo Economic Review called it the end of the Pacific century for America, and they might not be wrong. Hiroshi Tanaka, a 30-year veteran at Sony, was actually in the room when the final papers were signed. He told reporters that America had forced their hand with unpredictable trade policies. This man, who spent 3 decades building relationships between Japanese and American companies, actually wept while signing the agreement. He knew it meant abandoning partnerships that had defined his entire career. Let that sink in for a moment. America's most reliable ally felt they had no choice but to hedge their entire economic future on India instead of us. Now, here's where this gets really interesting, because we're not just talking about foreign countries making foreign decisions. This is reshaping America itself. US manufacturing job projections show a potential 15% drop by 2026, directly tied to this trade relationship shift. But remember Sarah Chen, our electronics importer from Seattle? She's not just surviving this transition, she's thriving. Her margins are actually 12% better working with Indian suppliers than they ever were with Chinese ones. Harvard Business Review just published a study showing that American companies making the switch early are reporting significant cost savings and more reliable supply chains. The tariffs that were meant to protect American business might have accidentally created America's most formidable competitor. Here's the thing though, this isn't necessarily a disaster if you know how to read the signs. Smart American businesses are already building relationships in Mumbai, Chennai, and Bangalore. They're getting ahead of this curve instead of being dragged behind it. McKinsey's latest report shows that companies making these moves early are gaining a 23% market advantage over competitors still trying to navigate tariff uncertainties. India's infrastructure improvements over the past 5 years make it an ideal alternative for businesses looking for stability and growth. If your business depends on global trade, this shift isn't a threat you need to fear. It's an opportunity you can't afford to miss. So here's what I want to know. Are these 10 countries abandoning America, or is America pushing them away? And more importantly, which side of this economic transformation do you want to be on? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Are tariffs protecting American interests, or are they isolating us from the global economy we helped create? Because based on what these 10 countries just did, that question might determine America's economic future.